And step 6 was, if you can believe it or not, was settle the estate. And I thought, oh my God, how is it possible that all of this stuff I am doing can be summed up into one sort of bullet point?
Settle the estate. That's it. Easy breezy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Aligning Life and Wealth series. We're making money mean more by aligning it with aspects of life that matter most. We're interviewing what I like to call our life experts, from relationships to diet to home security. Their services have a great impact on the lives of many. I'm Michael Conway, President and CEO of Conway Wealth, and today I'm excited to introduce to you Sarah Grifferty, founder and CEO of LooseEnds. Sarah, it's great to have you. Good to see you.
Thanks, Mike. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we'll have a great conversation. Your space is definitely needed for families, so we'll jump into it, and you can help us unpack what you do. So to that end, Sarah, can you give us a little bit of background on LooseEnds and what the company itself does?
Yeah. So LooseEnds helps families with all of the, let's call them administrative pieces after somebody has died. So think of really anything that could come up, right? We've got handling financial accounts, finding and closing social media, even coordinating, donating clothes, right? All of these pieces that you have after to settle a person's life, we work with executors and families to work through all of those. And what we often do is we work like a quarterback amongst all the other professionals that you might be working with. So that's you all at Conway Wealth. It's the attorneys that are, at our recommendation, we are hoping that you are working with realtors even. Our work really is trying to make sure this becomes a cohesive process rather than be as fragmented, really, as it typically is.
It's interesting. And even as you talk, the social media part of it, right? We just had a security expert on recently and talking about that aspect of people's lives. And so if they have one account or two or 10 and what that looks like and that footprint and shutting that all down.
Yeah.
So hard to talk about, I guess, on some level. So can you share with us, why did you start this company? What was the thought process here, and how did you get into this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly not a day goes by where I don't hear, oh, that's such a weird space, but that makes so much sense, right? Like a lot of people, it sort of clicks quickly, but certainly not something that is, you can't go to school for it. So I, like with most things, I learned the hard way through personal experience. Both my parents died when I was in my early 20s. First my dad, then my mom. And I spent about 4 years as an executor, winding down my mom's estate after, everything had happened. And I was lucky. I had a lot of resources at my disposal, but it was still really challenging. And I often found myself turning, to Google. And this would have been 2015. Just looking for like a guide, anything that was a list, a checklist, a repository of things to do. And I remember at that time, I found an AARP article, and it was the 6 things to do after somebody has died. And
was it comprehensive or not so much?
Well, steps 1 through 5 had all taken place in the first week. So everything essentially leading up to a funeral or a final service. And step 6 was, if you can believe it or not, was settle the estate. And I thought, oh my God, how is it possible that all of this stuff I am doing can be summed up into one sort of bullet point?
Settle the estate. That's it. Easy breezy.
Just as if you should know what that means, as if there is, any sort of, again, list or anything to do. And I was getting, working with an attorney, working with a financial advisor, getting a sort of just piecing it together. And it was really complex and just didn't make a lot of sense. So once I got out of, really like what I would call the epicenter of that experience, I just started asking people, was it this hard for you? Was it as complicated? Assuming it was something I was doing on my end, right? What am I doing wrong? What piece am I missing? It became so clear so quickly, Michael, that like whether you were 23 like I was, you're 53, you're 93, handling these logistics, these administrative pieces, it's so tough. No one wants to do it.
As you're speaking, I'm just sitting here thinking my brain is going through checklists of the cars and the property and we already social media, but all insurance policy. There's a lot. There's a lot to do. How, Sarah, walk us through how you work with an executor of an estate. So you have, from personal experience, you lived through this at a young age. And learned, but then you've built the company, you've built LooseEnds, and now somebody needs this solution. How do you come in and work with the executor?
Yeah. So I went back to school. I got my MBA. I did over 100 interviews with people because, of course, it would be great if we could just move forward on personal experience, but I knew that was not going to be the case. So I used all of that time to research and essentially build what LooseEnds is now, which is a service-based business. It's a consulting style business. And that's how we help families. We work one-on-one very closely, trying to get them a highly customized solution for whatever it is they need. So it sort of falls into like 4 steps, essentially. The first is our introductory call, which is free, no strings attached. I am using this purely to see what somebody is facing. And it's usually typically enough time that we talk through like their 2 to 3 biggest priorities. And then if from that we determine, okay, this seems like something you need, we can help you further, we then move to what we have as our onboarding session.
Okay.
And this is that deep dive, Michael, that you were just talking about. Okay, sure. I think everyone knows right away. Usually the 2 things people are worried about, the finances in some capacity or the real estate, right? Those are the most pressing things. But in this onboarding call, I am trying to paint the entire picture of this person's life. So we're looking, where are the documents? Do you know where the marriage license is? Like those specifics. And we're going through financial accounts. We're going through real estate, utilities, services, like on their property. Do they have an annual pest control person coming in? All
Right,
these small things, all the digital assets, all the streaming services, physical possessions, really painting this full picture.
I have a lot of things that get delivered to the house, whether it's protein shakes or food delivery. I must have 8 of these things, and sometimes they show up, and I'm like, did I order this? I can't imagine all the lists of Hey,
yes.
Can we go to for a minute? How do you handle the emotional aspect of dealing with this? Because I'm sure some cases are much harder than others, for sure. But there still has to be a pretty heavy load, right? At times someone's passed away and it's all new. Maybe even the survivor is not accustomed to dealing with these things at all. Maybe
Exactly.
they're very fluent in all of this, maybe not, but I would think that would add a layer of anxiety.
Absolutely. And I mean, my work even being more on the project management side, there's just no way to untie the emotional aspect of what you're doing with these like logistics and the bureaucratic pieces that you're handling. So I use that first call with any of my prospective clients. I let them vent to me, right? They come out and they say exactly what they have on their head right there at that moment. And my first question, no matter what, is what does your support system look like? Because to your point, this emotional piece is a huge weight for people. And my hope is my work is taking a lot of the load so you can focus on that more. But it's really important for me to understand what type of support this person has and who's in their corner. And if they don't have very many people, very much support, my role is to help them get the right type of support that they might need. Because, even from personal experience, I didn't seek out any sort of emotional support after my mom had died for 4.5, almost 5 years.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
and it's a weight for people, right? You're like, I have to deal with the house. I've got kids. I've got new responsibilities. I've got all these things, but you're left last on the plate, right? So that's the last thing you're capable of even handling is how to, put on your own life mask, even though we know that intellectually. So I have a whole repository of how to get people the grief support that they need, whether it's, working with them to find someone locally, grief groups, grief camps for their kids, resources online if they just want something to go through. It's really important to me that that becomes part of the process too.
What would you say would be low-hanging, some of the top things somebody should be considering, right? Well, first of all, I would probably do nothing at first, right? Because do some people knee-jerk reaction and want to like, oh my gosh, I have to solve today? Well, no, let's take a breath here.
110%. I mean, I could not say this, shouting it from the rooftops more. The first thing is you have time, right? You don't need to rush any decisions. There is almost truly, I work on this day in, day out. There is almost nothing that is truly urgent. There are a few things you want to do, with some, quickness, but otherwise there is nothing. And I see people rush in really for two reasons. The first is somebody told them to do it, right? Oh, so-and-so said I should do this, or I need to do this first, or what have you. So that's, that sense of urgency we have. But the second reason is really because I think people really want to feel like they've done something. Death is the most uncontrolled experience in our lives, right? We have no control over it. The timing, the outcome, the circumstance, what we're in now, nothing. And I see people come in and they just want to feel some sense of control. And so if they can cancel the card or do this one activity or do this one task and check the box, I think that motivates a lot of people. But my first thing is just, cool it for a minute, because there's a lot that happens after. You want to make decisions wisely.
I actually didn't have this on my list of questions, but you made me think of it. Are there mistakes people can make that are they're looking to fill the emotional void, and I need to do something, I need to act, but then they could make a mistake? Is that a fair comment, or I don't know how to frame that better than that?
I mean, it's fair enough that I have like my own term for it.
Okay, there you go.
So it's very common. It's extremely common. So I just call them domino decisions, because I think it's very easy for somebody to visualize, okay, this is a task that if you do it, you can't go back, and you're going to set off all the other dominoes in the line. So a big one, a very common one I see is canceling a credit card. And like you said, you have things coming to the house. Sometimes everything's automated now, right? So we have all these things connected. I see people cancel the credit card. Then they find out that the electric bill was being auto paid through the credit card. Then they realize that the cameras that they plugged in to have some sense of security on the property, now those don't work. Now they're on vacation and they can't get to the house.
Ooh, yeah,
one after the other. And this is true for so many aspects of it. It doesn't take a lot. There's no right or wrong answer necessarily, but it's just to say, okay, let's know what's connected to that credit card before we cancel it. Taking a step back, I think, before you, like you said, sort of pull the trigger and just quickly move forward on things.
How can families better prepare for handling these responsibilities ahead of time, if at all possible? Checklists or what are we doing there?
So the first and most obvious is estate planning. There is, of course, many shades of estate planning. So I would say work with an attorney, work with your financial advisors, make sure you're building sort of a robust and personalized estate plan. But what I often talk about too is I think we sort of think about estate planning as just legal documents. And that's a huge piece of it, right? It's the advance directives, it's the power of attorney, the will or the trust. Those
Yeah.
are critical. But there's all these other pieces that I see can make such a profound impact after if you do them as well. So that's things like having conversations with your family. Don't leave everything in the documents or not even in the documents, right? Like have those conversations. Things like having money set aside for immediate expenses. So I see this a lot. People think, well, there's plenty of money to pay for everything, but in fact, it gets locked up in probate, or people have to go through the getting the death certificate and notifying them that they're the beneficiary. There's steps involved. So even having money for bills and funeral expenses is really important early on. Inventorying all your accounts, it used to be that we would wait at the mailbox for the first month after somebody died, and you'd see what documents came in and what account numbers and all of this. Now everything's paperless. So we don't have that. We don't have the trail that we used to have to figure out and piece together a person's life if you weren't, completely aware of everything.
Sure.
And then, things like updating beneficiaries. Huge estate planning tool, but people don't think about it as estate planning. Make sure those are updated. Write down your phone and computer passwords. Have those someplace. Have a letter of instruction. None of this is legal work. You don't have to pay anyone anything to do this.
Yeah, but it is so important to in particular, the survivors, right, that are left to deal with the emotional aspect of it, and then the details. Any one thing that people I have on my list here that people neglect that in closing out estates that's an issue? I'm sure there's several, but anything that jumps out that.
Yeah, I think the number one thing, and it's very simple, notify the credit bureaus. I think a lot of people neglect this step. It goes a long way to help and avoid any sort of identity theft, which is common enough after a person has died. And all you have to do is send them the death certificate, write, a quick letter. I have a template, that I even send out. It's just a small step that adds, added security essentially for your loved one's assets.
The other thing that I've thought of as we've talked through this today is how do you handle if you're dealing with one particular survivor? I'm sure it can be extremely difficult, but if there's multiple family members that have wildly different opinions on things, that's going through my mind as well. How do you navigate that?
I mean, it's challenging no matter who's involved, right? And I am always contracted only with the person in the driver's seat, let's call it. So the executor, the administrator, the trustee. But this is, what I tell all of my clients I work with, being an executor is a fairly thankless job. No one's going to pat you on the back at the end of it, probably, and say, good job, you did that. People are just mad, right? People are mad. They have different ideas about how things should be done. My suggestion is always just to understand, grief is so complex and people who are grieving act in many ways. And if you can just, as yourself, sort of understand that piece of it, even people get angry and lash out when they're grieving. People are removed and isolate themselves. People procrastinate. Everyone sort of approaches it in a different way. So to be able to sort of just help somebody who's going through that within a family to understand people act differently. It's okay. And we'll figure out whatever needs to happen. But ultimately, all of the legal responsibility, it's typically with one person. So making sure that they're doing it in the correct way.
Gotcha. I would say I consider myself, I've been at this a long time, and I consider myself a student of financial planning and my business. And I've spent years doing it and learning and have coaches and the whole bit. Little surprised that, and so pleased that we met you, because what an eye opener to think about. Yeah, wow, what an Achilles heel of issues and a whole host of issues that families have to deal with, and everybody has to deal with it.
Yep.
But it was beyond the purview of my day job, and so LooseEnds as a solution, I think is fabulous. Any other pieces of advice you would want our clients to know about?
Yeah. Very specific one.
Yeah.
Double and triple check the information on a death certificate. This is one of those pieces you're not ever thinking about. When you go to
you assume it's right.
Exactly.
Legal document.
Exactly. Double, triple check when you're giving that information, typically to a funeral home, that you have, it's all correct, because getting that fixed can be, just a nightmare.
Do you have an example? You mean like a social or what, or anything? The spelling of the name,
some people have the shorthand name listed, not the full name, the date and the month of, birth listed wrong, the place of death. I mean, any of these things, even just typos, institutions won't often accept it if something is off. So just making sure, because that is the one document you are going to use absolutely the most. So making sure it's all, buttoned up, all correct. And, if you go to the funeral home, bring somebody with you, have them look it over, just make sure that all those details are correct.
Got it. Yeah. So this has been so helpful. So thank you, Sarah, for joining the Aligning Life and Wealth series, and for the impact you're creating by allowing people to best align their life and wealth through family and the loss of a loved one. You can find this video along with the rest of our Aligning Life and Wealth series on YouTube, LinkedIn, X, and Facebook. So it was great to be with you today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael.
See you. Thanks.